Greetings, my fellow Freedom Loving Sovereign Thinkers. This is LL3's newest podcast. My name is Craig, transmitting from the beautiful swampy mangroves of South Florida. And today's date is Monday, September 27th, 2017. February 27th, I said, right? Not September. February 27th, 2017. Oh, yes. Typical spot. CJ's Lounge, located at 400 Southwest 1st Avenue in the heart of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, along the beautiful New River, right near the southwest corner of Andrews Avenue Bridge. Have you ever experienced dealing with psychic vampires? I have. Great amount of times in my life. But they hate you with a passion, and I'm very damn proud of it. Trying to drain your energies, make you miserable, thinking they're above everybody because they can't even wipe their own behinds. I'm like a psychic vampire killer, I can say, symbolically speaking. Not afraid to call them out for who they are. Pieces of manifestive garbage. Yeah, that's how I see things. Because you have that in all walks of life, whether it's personal, business, pleasure, etc. But it always comes to a time you gotta counter it with vigilance and finesse. That they despise that a lot more. It's like throwing a silver stake in their heart and their blood's boiling to the core that their head confoundedly explodes. Yeah, it sounds a little graphic, but I'm being symbolic. And I trust that all in good faith, my friends. Yeah, so, everyone's, with all the distractions going on with the idiot news, I've taken the initiative to go a little bit of a different approach. This came from a couple of articles about the new national gun ban, which is have it in Maryland. So let's just check this out. This one originally first article came from the AmericanThinker.com. It's by Jonathan F. Keeler. It's entitled Fourth Circuit Sets the Stage for a New National Gun Ban. And as it reads here, an unusual opinion at times reads more like an op-ed at the New York Times than a legal ruling. The Fourth Circuit Court last week upheld Maryland's highly restrictive Firearm Safety Act. It apparent that the Fourth Circuit acted in anticipation of a Hillary Clinton victory in November, in which case its decision would have gone unchallenged by the Supreme Court or affirmed thus substantially, laying the groundwork for the overturn of the Supreme Court's ruling in the District of Columbia versus Heller. And with that, the effective national evisceration of the Second Amendment under a Second Clinton administration, the Fourth Circuit, like a lot of people, miscalculated, and their judicial overreach should push a heretofore reluctant Supreme Court to reinforce the Heller decision. The Fourth Circuit Court's decision in Colby et al. Versus Maryland was a direct, if often legally incomprehensible attempt to greatly limit the Supreme Court seminal decision in Heller and set the stage for a new national ban on semi-automatic rifles. Heller held that the Second Amendment confers an individual, not a collective, right to keep and bear arms. Colby, so long as it stands, says this individual right does not extend to any firearm with military utility, which is arguably pretty much every gun ever made. Yes, you are heard them grinding coffee. Yeah, this is a coffee shop, and they don't mind having me do my show in this facility, so always check them out. And I will proceed. That for the long term, more immediately, the decision transparently is an attempt to pave the way for a return of a national ban on AR-15 type rifles, falsely labeled by the court in various gun banners assault rifles. Had Hillary won the election in November as the court expected, it would have been a done deal. Following a decision against the plaintiff's gun owners in the Maryland District Court, Colby went to the Fourth Circuit on appeal over a year ago. Oral arguments in 2015 appeared to go in favor for the plaintiff appellant when the case was heard before a mostly sympathetic three-judge panel, giving Maryland gun owners some sense of hope. In 2016, that panel vacated the district court's ruling as unconstitutional, that the lower court had applied an inappropriate standard of intermediate scrutiny to the Maryland statute. The panel remanded the case to the district for rehearing under the appropriate standard of strict scrutiny that ordinarily applies to laws that seek to restrict fundamental constitutional rights. At this point, the rest of the left-leaning Fourth Circuit stepped in, vacating their own panel's decision and ordered the case to the reheard en banc before the entire Fourth Circuit. That happened in May 2016, and it's likely the court reached its decision not too long after, but awaited the outcome of the November presidential election to issue the opinion. Expecting a Clinton victory, decision would have given Hillary the entry point she needed to reimpose the assault rifle ban, and thus relatively breathtaking nature of the decision, which did not merely disagree with the panel that found that the district court did not apply the proper standard of review, but rather found out that the Second Amendment did not even apply to the case. The determination was based on a highly tendentious argument that takes 5 words from the Heller decision, that the Second Amendment does not apply to M16 rifles and the like, and specifying the M16, the Supreme Court clearly meant weapons that are fully automatic, such as machine guns, which have long been subject to strict regulation. This is what distinguishes an M16 from an AR-15 and why only the former is an assault rifle. Instead, the Fourth Circuit devised an argument quite as if it were appellee, rather than the court hearing an appeal, that the AR-15 and the large capacity magazine that feed it are essentially indistinguishable from M16 and other weapons with particular military utility, even though neither the U.S. military nor any other military has adopted the AR-15. For analysts of the factual and legal contortions this Fourth Circuit goes to get to that conclusion. The National Review has good stuff, and there's a couple of links you can check out yourselves, my friends. Interesting articles. I recommend it. What is more interesting politically is that the most of the Fourth Circuit's opinion is really surplusage. That is gratuitous commentary that lawyers also call dicta. While not binding on other courts, dicta can be cited and added to the briefs of gun control advocates in future cases, from the basis of more restrictive substantive rulings by this court or other courts, or support legislative initiatives in blue states to further restrict Second Amendment rights. Much of the Fourth Circuit's dicta surrounding the efficacy and success of the 1994 statute that banned AR-15 type rifles, which expired in 2004. The plaintiffs in Colby noted the ban's almost non-existent impact on reducing criminal activity, and similarly, the negligible effect of the lifting of the ban. Though through extraneous commentary and footnotes, the court repeatedly suggests that the ban was effective despite convincing, unbiased evidence to the contrary. Most of the rest of the circuit for its dicta constitutes an explanation that even had guns subject to the ban been subject to the Second Amendment, the trial court selection of a lower standard of review, intermediate scrutiny, was appropriate. This obviously to buttress an opinion in case the Supreme Court does go after it, along with an accounting of 3 other circuits, 2nd, 9th, and 7th. that have upheld various state restrictions on similar weapons since the Heller ruling, but on less aggressive grounds. Despite Clinton's loss, the Fourth Circuit decided not to back off its decision and put down a marker to challenge the Supreme Court. It's a bold step, but not an unreasonable one for these leftist jurists. The Supreme Court has proven reluctant to take Second Amendment cases and has basically done little to support Heller. But in Colby, the Fourth Circuit has gone far beyond what the other circuits have done, boldly rewriting Justice Scalia's decision in a fashion the late justice would never have condoned. The case was appealed by Justice Gorsuch, should be on the bench by the time the decision for review is ripe. It is incumbent on Roberts' court to act appropriately, make justices of the Fourth Circuit pay for their gamble, and put some meat on Heller. A failure to do so would set the stage for a quick national ban in the event that Trump doesn't win re-election in 2020. Interesting synopsis here about this whole gun ban fiasco of certain weapons, the Firearm Safety Act. As far as I'm concerned, this is pretty treasonous on the behalf of the panel within the Fourth Circuit. All right? You always have merit on these areas, but they just want to have an obtuse nature about you cannot own certain firearms or a certain amount of power, but the government can, right? That's downright tyrannical, unacceptable, and censured in my view of the world. And we'll continue on here on, let's see here. Oh yeah, I know what to do. Gonna do a little quick little link here. One moment. Yeah, perfect. So it looks like I made a mistake. It got away from me, but not this time. So I'm just gonna do a little quick link. Bam. All right. We're going to continue on pertaining to this particular case. And this came from gunowners.ca. It says here, fake news infects the Fourth Circuit on assault weapons ruling. This is from Gun Owners of California. Came out today by L.A. Paredes. It says here, last week the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals upheld Maryland's ban on assault weapons in an absurd ruling that deemed if they look like weapons of war, they should be treated in the same manner. Turning reason on its head in Colby versus Hogan, the court stated the difference between an AR-15 single most popular platform, commonly known as modern sporting rifles or MRSs, and authentic military guns such as an M16 are only slight. What the hell does that mean? Slight. It's like kind of, sort of, right? Absolutely. We must ask whether the courts are engaged in their own version of fake news, especially since the ruling fully ignores very obvious differences between an M16 and AR-15. The M16 is fully automatic, which means gunshot shoots continually when the trigger is pulled. AR-15 does not, as it takes repeated trigger pulls to discharge a bullet. That is a fact. This is an enormous distinction the court deliberately chose to overlook. It was kind of like comparing an F-15 Fighting Eagle to a single-engine Cessna. The court continued its judicial drivel by describing sporting and hunting rifles as exceptionally lethal weapons of war. Are these guys in Bizarro World or what? They even went so far to state that military-style guns are disproportionately used in U.S. mass shootings and thus fall outside the Second Amendment because they are best suited for military use rather than private citizens. So they're telling you this. If you're a private citizen, you shouldn't own it. Only governments can. Can we say police state rhetoric 101? Precisely. As it reads here, per data complied by Breitbart, however, handguns are more often the weapon of choice in such shootings rather than so-called assault weapons. The decision has been called everything from atrocious and taking pot shots at Keller to killing the Second Amendment. In describing far-reaching abhorrence of the Colby decision, the Al Burlesque Quarrel says, we do begin on our analysis of the atrocious decision of the Fourth Circuit in Colby. The importance of this awful decision rests first upon the majority's disregard for the presidential holdings of Heller and McDonald. The majority shreds the legal principle of satire decisis, which requires courts to uphold prior decisions lest the foundation of our system of case law fall apart. The importance of this absurd decision rests, second, on the court's clear contempt for the explicit fundamental right of the people to keep and bear arms confided in the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, and the atrocious decision rests, third, on the majority's clear rebuke of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Scalia's legacy. And you can read the decision, the full analysis, and I'll do that in a moment. Very interesting here. And I will read that in good faith. And I'll just I will read that. So we'll proceed. The Alberts Quarrel provides analysis of recently passed state and federal arms legislations and gun control laws, detailing them in a careful, methodical, and detailed manner, while pointing the ambiguities, vagueness, and inconsistencies in the language of the laws. They also explain the myths of assault weapons and how anti-gun politicians and major news media organizations perpetrate and perpetuate lies about firearms in a concert effort to weaken our Second Amendment. Yes, these individuals will make Benedict Arnold a profound patriot. And I'll read here the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit is one of the 12 regional appellate courts within the federal judicial system. The court hears appeals from 9 federal district courts in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and from federal administrative agencies. So, what they're trying to state here, trying to combine certain weapons are very the same. And they believe that you, as an honorable citizen, a private individual, shouldn't own these particular firearms. Only the military and the police could remember. They assume government is smarter than you. You're just a bunch of confounded morons that cannot wipe your own behinds. And I say it the other way around. When what they're doing is actually putting a nation in peril. And for that, it's called treason, abating and comforting the enemy. And folks need to realize one thing, that the Second Amendment is undebatable, including the Ninth Amendment as well. Yes, I like using both. People get offended. Well, my free speech does always supersedes your sensitivity or personal feelings. Okay, thank you. And speaking of that, of the Second Amendment, let's just check this. Let's see what they have to say here. Accordance with the JPFO, Jews for the Preservation of Firearms Ownership, and the late, great Aaron Zellman was around. Real fantastic work. And according to this, I will add that to the memo. It says here, Amendment 2, a well-rigged militia being necessary to security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. What it means, individuals, the people, have the right to own and use weapons without interference from the government. So, this particular firearms ban actually is an interference from the government. Because the fact is this, my friends, and even in the state of Maryland, whoever gets installed, they have an oath to protect and defend both federal and state constitutions and the position you're going to be in. Yeah, you can look it up. Maryland Constitution. Self-explanatory, my friends. They don't want you to know that because they think you're that damn stupid. All right? So I'm going to add that to the memo on the Second Amendment Bill of Rights for the JPFO. And let's check out this whole Colby Hogan versus Hogan from ArbalisCoral.com by Tony Courier. Bubble guns in the Fourth Circuit take pot shots at Heller in the circuit's poorly reasoned opinion. Part 1, Colby State Introduction. On February 21st, 2017, anti-gun establishment judges of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit decided a case, one directly and negatively impacting the Second Amendment right of the people to keep and bear arms. The case, Colby versus Hogan, 813 F.3D 160, or Fourth Circuit 2016. I can go on. I will skip all that. It's the latest in a slew of badly reasoned cases coming down from the pike since the late Justice Antonin Scalia penned the majority opinion of the seminal Second Amendment U.S. Supreme Court case to the Columbia versus Heller. What we are seeing are the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals openly define the clear, important, and purport of Heller. We are seeing the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, the Second, Fourth, and Seventh U.S. Circuits Court of Appeals operating in an open revolt to the U.S. Supreme Court on Second Amendment cases. The High Court in Heller made abundantly clear that the right the people to keep and bear arms is an individual right, a right connected to a person's connection with the militia. 2 years later, questions arose whether the Heller decision applies to the states. Of course, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito, writing for the majority in the case, McDonald versus City of Chicago 2010, that held that the individual right to keep and bear arms applies to the states no less so than the federal government. The U.S. Circuit of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit obviously has clear disdain for the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and concomitantly disaffection for the Heller and McDonald cases that provide a firm foundation for the Second Amendment's preservation and provide welcome relief to those Americans who wish to exercise their right under it. Where to begin? Where do we begin on our analysis of the atrocious decision of the Fourth Circuit in Colby? The importance of this awful decision rests first upon the majority's disregard for the presidential holdings of Heller and McDonald. The majority shreds the legal principle of stare decisions, which requires courts to uphold prior decisions, lest to the foundation of our system of case law fall apart. The importance of this absurd decision rests second on the court's clear contempt for the explicit fundamental right of the people to keep and bear arms confided in the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And this atrocious decision rests third on the majority's clear rebuke of the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Scalia's legacy. Why is the Colby case in particular critical to those who wish to safeguard the right of the people to keep and bear arms under the Second Amendment? Since 2008, when the Heller decision became the law of the land, there have been several cases wending their way up through the various circuit courts that have dealt directly of tangentially and despairingly with the Second Amendment. What makes Colby case so important to those Americans who hold dear the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is that the decision openly defies Heller. One, the Colby decision amounts to a direct frontal assault against the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Two, the decision is a disrespectful and unrestrained attack on the methodology and Scalia employed when the justice wrote his opinion for the majority in Heller. Now the Fourth Circuit Court, writing this damning opinion in Colby, won't admit its denigration of the Second Amendment and, by extension, its disrespectful attitude towards Justice Scalia. After all, the decision of the high courts are the supreme law of the land, and the lower courts, state and federal, are legally bound to respect and to apply rulings, holdings, and reasoning of the high court. Because one thing you got to look at the Constitution. When you're going to go into statehood under the United States, you have to honor the U.S. Constitution as the supreme law of the land. That's Article 6. Look it up. How do lower courts undermine rulings and holdings of the U.S. Supreme Court cases they do not like? If lower court doesn't like a holding of the U.S. Supreme Court, it has weapons in its arsenal. Lower courts use these weapons against the U.S. Supreme Court holding if, one, the lower court disagrees with the decision of the high court, and two, if a lower court disagrees with the philosophy of law underlying the ruling of the high court, and three, if a lower court disagrees with the legal and logical methodology employed in support of the high court's ruling in the case. One technique a lower court uses to undercut high court ruling is to argue a distinction in fact patterns. We see this in Colby. Of course, a reputable court would attempt to discern similarities in the facts of a case before the court goes on hither and yon, denying obvious similarity in fact patterns. A lower court should give maximum effect to a ruling of the Supreme Court, your Supreme Court, but may feel less compelled to do so if it can plausibly demonstrate a distinction in fact patterns between facts as pretended in a case before the high court and in fact are as presented in a case being heard in a lower court. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit in Colby opened as the fact of the Heller case are wholly unlike those in Colby. The court is wrong. What do we say that the Fourth Circuit is wrong? First, the critical facts in Colby are virtually identical to those in Heller. A couple of those plaintiffs in Colby, as with the plaintiffs in Heller, are individuals who are under no disability. They are average law-abiding, rational, sensible, sane American citizens whose right to own and possess firearms is undeniable. Second, the D.C. government in Heller and the Maryland state government in Colby both enacted laws to ban outright an entire category of firearms that American citizens traditionally and commonly employ for self-defense. In our analysis of the Colby case to follow, we will demonstrate how the U.S. Court of Appeals to the Fourth Circuit attempts to skirt clear U.S. Supreme Court precedent to ignore and undercut Heller and, in doing so, allow stands a restrictive Maryland firearms law that is unconstitutional and inconsistent with the Heller decision. The sad result is that average law-abiding, sane American citizens who seek to own and possess firearms have traditionally owned and possessed for decades can no longer do so. Thus, notwithstanding that the gun ban enacted in Maryland applied originally only to the residents of the state of Maryland and to those passing through the state. The Fourth Circuit decision directly impacts the rights of American citizens in 5 states that comprise the Fourth Circuit Court: North and South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland. All individuals of these 5 states are now denied the right to keep and bear arms guaranteed under the Second Amendment because they are denied the right to keep and bear an entire category of firearms they have traditionally owned, firearms that the American public commonly owns and possesses for self-defense. Don't worry, we got the Ninth Amendment. Any questions? I'm going to link the Bill of Rights on there from the JPFO, so read that as well, my friends. Second, lower courts that harbor a strong disdain for the ruling in Heller and who thereby harbor a disdain for the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution misconstrue, whether deliberately or callously, or if not deliberately and callously, then certainly carelessly and recklessly, the reasoning of the high court. The lower court substitutes for the high court's reasoning is one own flawed reasoning that lends support to a conclusion the lower court seeks, rather than to the conclusion the high court requires that the lower court reach. In Colby, the Fourth Circuit applied a standard of review that the majority in Heller, and in particular Justice Scalia, who wrote in the opinion have rejected outright. We explained this all in detail when we proceeded with the comprehensive case of Colby. Third, the lower courts that harbor a strong dislike for the Second Amendment and who attempt to meander around the clear and cogent reasoning, rulings, and holdings of the High Court often considered matters wholly outside to the purview of the law, namely political matters. This cloud judicial judgment as application of the laws to the facts of the case is colored by personal biases and feelings rather than by reasoned, seasoned judicial thought. In the process, judicial neutrality and integrity is lost as partiality enters into judicial decision making. Thus, the rule of law is denied one or the other party to a lawsuit. As we proceed with our analysis, we make abundantly clear the extent to which the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, considers matters outside of legal constraints. Matters that have no legitimate legal or that the matter legal connection to or bearing on how a case ought to be decided. The dreadful decision in Colby also operates as a warning to the U.S. Senate and Judiciary Committee. The committee better gets cracking on holding a confirmation hearing of the president's nominee. Neil Gorosh to the U.S. Supreme Court must do so because Colby case must not stand unchallenged. The anti-gun forces have slowly chiseled away at Heller through other poorly reasoned and decided cases. But Colby is the most desired because this decision, more than other than the Second Amendment cases coming down since Heller and McDonald, constitutes a direct assault on the Supreme Court president and, if allowed to stand unchallenged, severely weakens the Second Amendment and will undoubtedly embolden other anti-gun federal circuit courts that wish to chisel away at Heller. Make no mistake, plaintiffs in Colby v. Hogan will take this case to your Supreme Court. The must-for decision here is the antithetical with the holding set forth and reasoning evinced in the Samuel, Heller, and McDonald cases. But Gorosh on the High Court the justices will likely to vote to hear this case. The justices must hear this case. The case must be overturned lest the legal precedents of Heller and McDonald be continually ignored by state governments. What Colby versus Hogan really is all about and why the issues presented in is critical to the safeguarding of our Bill of Rights, we explain a two part of this series. So, there will be a part 2 on this. And let's see if they have it on here. I'm just going to make sure. But the whole thing is this, my friends. They're violating your natural born rights. Okay? So that's what they want. That's how they want you to assume. Claiming that you're so that damn dumb, not too bright, and have an IQ of a turnip. Okay? We gotta keep on looking and seeing things a lot broader than what it is. To the contrary, my friends, they want to believe that you are so damn stupid, and you're going to belly up, be dumb, standing happy, and be their Uncle Toms or Aunt Jemimas. That's how I look at these imbeciles. They assume that you're that damn dumb. Well, as far as I'm concerned, they're a lot more complex than what those numbnuts assume. And this is why you have to understand why the Second Amendment is vital. And even in a court of law, you are the most powerful person in the courtroom. They can make this law and you can nullify it. Not guilty, no victim, no crime. All right? And that's how you're going to look at it. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm typing away as we speak. I'm going to try to get a brochure here on the Second Amendment, and you can print it up and share it to everyone you know and all that good stuff. Got it right here. Fully Informed Jury Association. Jury Health Projects. Who owns your body? Jury protection under the Second Amendment. I'm going to add that link to it. It's on a PDF format. Absolutely. And it tells you your actions of your rights. You can print it up and show it to everyone else you know. That'll be the next thing. Jury power, jury education, jury notification, jury protection. And this is interesting. It says here, Alexander Hamilton, which I'm not too crazy about. An American founding father so said in 1804, jurors should acquit even against the judge's instruction. If exercising their judgment with discretion and honesty, they have a clear conviction that the charge of the court is wrong. They'll give you a good explanation about history of jury notification under the Second Amendment. So I'm going to add that to that memo as well. Very good stuff, friends. I always recommend that. And and what's interesting to all those folks, even in Maryland, all right, beautiful state of Maryland. There's some people that are from there are great folks, and they can have to realize you guys have a duty under Declaration of Rights of your state constitution. And like it says here, we can look at Article 2, the Constitution of the United States and the laws made, of which are made, and precedents thereof, and all treaties made, which shall be made in the authority of the United States, and are the supreme law of the state, and the judge of the state, and the people of the state are and shall be thereby anything the constitutional law of the state, the contrary, withstanding. Of course, you got the thing on states' rights, and it says here that the people, Article 4, that the people of the state have the sole exclusive right of regulating an internal government and police thereof as a free and sovereign independent state. All right, so let me just go on down here. I'm just looking here. Article 7, that the right of the people to participate. Nah, it's okay. Check this out. Article 9, that no power of suspending laws or execution of laws unless power derived from legislation ought to be exercised or allowed. So can this firearm, so-called semi-automatic weapons ban, is it violates Article 9 of their state constitution? I can say that. And we can go on further down here. I'm just looking. Oh, sorry about that. That Article 17, that retrospective laws punishing acts committed before the existence of such laws and by them only declared criminal or oppressive, unjust, and incompatible with liberty. Wherefore no ex post facto law ought to be made, nor any retrospective oath or restriction be imposed or required. So it cannot contradict, this law can contradict Article 17. All right? And it says here, Article 19, that every man for any injury done to him or in his person or property ought to have a remedy of the course of the law of the land, and ought to have justice and right freely without sale, fully without denial, and speedily without delay according to the law of the land. All right? And we go on here. All the way down here. Article 24, that no man ought to be taken or imprisoned or deceased for his freehold, liberties, or privileges, or outlawed, or exiled, or in any manner destroyed or deprived of his life, liberty, or property, but by judgment of his peers or by the law of the land. Okay. And here's Article 26. Can this law violate Article 26? That all warrants without oath or affirmation to search suspect places or to seize any property or properties are grievous or oppressive, and all general warrants to search suspected places or to apprehend suspected persons without naming or describing the place or the person special or illegal ought not to be granted. No conviction. 27, no conviction shall work of corruption of blood or forfeiture of estate. And 28, that a well-regulated militia is a proper and natural defense of a free government. And it says here, Standing armies are dangerous to liberty and ought not to be raised or kept up without the consent of the legislature. That's Article 29. And of course, I'm going to see here. Hold on here. I'm just going down here. Sorry about that. Let's keep on here. Article 40. That's a liberty. Nope, no problem. 40. Sorry. Bop. I'm just. And it says here. Article 45. This enumeration of rights shall not be construed to impair or deny others retained by the people. Equal rights under the law shall not be abridged because it denies sex. So right there, it's all self-explanatory. Even the right to keep and bear arms is a natural born right under Article 45 of the Maryland Constitution. It's all self-explanatory, my friends. There's no ands, ifs, or buts. They can ramble all they want. It doesn't work. It's unacceptable. Their rhetoric is null and void and deserves a nice P9 microphone when addressing this deceptive speak. How long you gonna let this happen? I defy this at all cost. That's why my religious views is demoniac resistance. Doesn't matter what your faith is. But we all have obligations or duties to stand up against this form of tyranny by any means necessary. The past is today's greatest teacher, my friends. Like I said time again, the government needs us more than we need them. You know, it's so odd and mind-boggling. I recall looking at Prohibition, and Maryland was the first state to nullify that amendment, the 18th Amendment, U.S. Constitution. Now they're going to belly up to tyranny. Say one thing, the past brothers and sisters of that state, they're rolling in their graves. Another thing I'm going to add to this will definitely be a video by Michael Bolden from the 10th Amendment saying the right to bear arms is a natural right. And it is. I don't give a damn what you think. Like it or not, deep down inside, you know I'm right. Okay, cool. So next article. Nice. There was a nice little thing on the whole thing was going on in Maryland, or the Fourth Circuit. Next one here came from naturalnews.com. This was done by Ethan Huff. It's entitled Nobel Prizes were awarded to Nazi scientists who developed Zyklon B to exterminate Jews. As it reads here, when the late Swedish chemist and engineer Alfred B. Nobel made a decision to set aside a $9 million cash sum upon his death to establish the Nobel Prize. His vision was to honor the great men and women throughout time whose accomplishments in peace, literature, physics, chemistry, physiology, medicine, and economic science conferred the greatest benefits to mankind. Little did he know, however, that many questionable individuals would end up becoming recipients of this much-coveted award, including Nazi scientists whose work led to the development of the chemicals purportedly used in death camps, gas chambers to murder prisoners. One of these questionable individuals is Fritz Haber, a Jewish man who wrote history books saying helped develop synthetic crop fertilizers that were later modified to become deadly chemical weapons, modern-day pesticides and herbicides. BBC News outlines Haber's role in the development of these chemicals as having been good intention. Working for chemical giant BASF, Haber partnered with Carl Bosch, one of the appliance company by the same name, to synthesize fertilizing ammonia from nitrogen and hydrogen for use on food crops, making them easier to grow and generate more food for hungry people. Da, 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 da. I will continue on. At the time, Harbour's accomplishments in developing this new fertilizer appeared entirely beneficial, having been dubbed by at least one observer to be the most important and technological invention of the 20th century. And yet, as World War I began to break out, it was quickly realized that these same chemicals could be used to develop chemical weapons, including the infamous IG Harbin Zyklon B chemical that the Nazi regime used to gas Jews and other prisoners in concentration camps. Even if he was just an ordinary, well-intentioned man who, like any other good Germans of the time, simply wanted to demonstrate his patriotism, Harbour would quickly go on to become a key asset to the Nazi war effort. BBC News credits him as being the first experiment with chlorine gas, which earned him a position of captain in the German army. During this time and before his untimely death, he also developed pesticide gases that would later be transformed into Zyklon B. Harbour's life was the tragedy of the German Jew, the tragedy of unrequited love, wrote Harbour's friend and much better known colleague as far as history is concerned, Albert Einstein, about Harbour's experience during the Nazi Party's rise to power. Harbour, if you don't know the full story, was eventually forced into exile as an anti-Jewish sentiment escalated prior to World War II. To Harbour's credit, his storied legacy is somewhat a mixed bag. While he didn't intentionally and necessarily betray his fellow Jewish countrymen with his accomplishments in fertilizer and pesticide technology, his work in these areas was still used by others to murder untold millions of Jews and other political prisoners during the Nazi era. There are many others with similar legacies, not to mention those who are known war criminals who have been recipients of the Nobel Peace Prize over the years. One notable example was Henry Kissinger, who was accused of committing war crimes for his involvement in the secret bombings of Cambodia between 1969 and 75. Just 2 years after receiving the Nobel Peace Prize, North Vietnam invaded South Vietnam, speaking their horrific violence of war that never should have happened in the first place, the Vietnam War. Needless to say, Kissinger's Nobel Prize was highly controversial, and 2 Norwegian Nobel Committee members actually resigned because of it. Al Gore is another credible winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, whose accomplishments in climate science research were overshadowed by his own hypocritical lifestyle. While preaching against the sin of atmospheric carbon dioxide and the need for humans to start living more modestly to offset rising global temperatures, Gore was exposed for using more than 20 times the national average of electricity at his Tennessee mansion, which has 20 rooms and a separate pool house. This is in addition to the fudge climate numbers that Gore used to support the failed notion of man-made global warming. Hey, I wasn't surprised when he spoke at the global warming function down up in Meisner Park Amphitheater in Boca Raton, Florida, which is South Palm Beach County. I was one of the loudmouths out over there that attended the protest and asked Al Gore this: Alberto, are you proud to be a bend-over Bob to the New World Order? And it was the funny thing about, because my voice carries, we couldn't use an amplified megaphone, so I just wrote up the sign, and I just start ridiculing him every time I get, and don't worry, it was family-oriented. Even the Boca police officers had smiles on their faces, and you know what? That's a good thing. And now we'll continue on here. And who could forget war criminal Barack Obama's ridiculous win of the Nobel Peace Prize just 12 days after he took office in 2009. Obama hadn't accomplished anything at the point other than laying the groundwork for continuing the Middle Eastern wars started by the previous Bush administration. Not only did Obama continue with these failed policies, but he actually escalated them. Journalist Kristen Powers referred to Obama's later aggression against Syria as a determination to attack, as well as his ongoing support of the war in Afghanistan, which she described as pointless and failing. Needlessly to say, there was absolutely no justifiable reason why Obama should have been honored for supporting peace, when in reality he was just another war hawk president. Go to @Evil News for more news on truly evil people and events. There's sources on here as well. Bloomberg, North Daily News, BBC, and Cheat Sheet. Of course. Barack Obama, just another bend over Bob and proud. Absolutely. You know what's great? Because I laughed at him when he first ran for office. Heard his beautiful, little pretty young voice. Oh, around about the freedom guy and all that. But he just spreads his butt cheeks to the one world order. He goes, okay, I'll read a teleprompter while I pull down my pants. And Ron Manuel said, bend over with how far, sir? And Jorge Soros, too, with his wrinkly bag sack. And that's how far I want to go. We'll just plug in. He went, okay, Jorge, give it to me, baby, from his teleprompter. All right? So this is why when I see these Nobel Peace Prizes and these winners, I just laugh so hard because they want to consume that you have an IQ of a turnip. That's right. All these warmongering demonods that will pull down their pants for fame and fortune and power. And go, yes, master, may I have another. So, always be careful what you wish for, my friends. Don't follow the hype and hoopla. Always read between the lines. Thank you, Ethan, for this article. And finally, came out by PJ Media. It was the first time I actually reading their work. Like I really read their stuff, and they follow me on Twitter. I should be ashamed of myself. I always should take the initiative and checking it out. But I'm glad I did. And this one came out by Jack Dunphy. It's entitled Governor Malloy Forces Cops to Choose Job Security Over Public Safety. This is a Connecticut governor, to be exact. Imagine, gentle readers, that you are a detective working homicide cases in the city or town where you live. Now imagine that you're investigating a murder, in which all evidence points to a single suspect. Several witnesses tell you they saw what happened, and each of them identifies the same person. You obtain a warrant for the man, book him into jail, and prepare to bring him before the bar of justice. But now imagine that your case against this man begins to unravel, not because he is innocent of the crime, but rather because your witnesses either recant their inculpating accounts or suddenly cannot be located. Your suspect, you see, is a gang member, and his associates let it know to be in the neighborhood that anyone who testifies against the man will be made to regret it. This message is transmitted through intimidating visits, vandalism, even physical assaults. The imitation campaign is so effective that none of your witnesses can be counted on to provide the testimony required to hold your suspect to account for the murder. After consultation with prosecutor assigned to your case, you reach the inescapable conclusion. The charges must be dismissed for lack of evidence. Your suspect goes free, perhaps killed again. This is not a far-fetched scenario. Every detective has known the experience of seeing someone on the street he is certain has committed a crime, but who escaped punishment because witnesses were dissuaded from testifying. There are few things more galling to a cop, but is the way the world often works. But in some cases, there is a consolation prize, a chance to remove the suspected criminal from society of his law-abiding neighborhoods. It is a hypothetical scenario. Our suspect is an illegal alien, one who even had been previously deported, only to slither back into our midst. With this information in mind, you contact an agent from the Department of Homeland Security who confirmed that the man is indeed eligible for deportation to his home country. The federal agents collect the man and bundle him off. Now, the outcome we would have preferred, perhaps, but better to see them expelled from the country than remain amongst us as a human ticking bomb. Good riddance, we say. But if we are working in Connecticut, where on Wednesday, Governor Malloy issued what he called guidance to law enforcement evidence to school districts regarding immigration matter. It is interesting to note that Governor Malloy grouped police officers and school districts into the same directive, as those through the issues concerning both are somehow similar. Strikes me as a tactical decision intended to insulate the directive against criticism. But Dunphy, the open borders types, will say, do you want ICE agents ramping through the schools? Now let's just read what this has to say. And it came out. And, it says here. Came out the 22nd to be exact. Malloy administration issues guidance to law enforcement and school districts regarding immigration matters. So there's a link for that. You can see it for yourself, okay? And there's a reason right here. Recent presidential executive orders prompt request for guidance on certain operations. Governor Daniel P. Malloy and the commissioners of the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, the Department of Correction, and the Department of Education today announced that in response to increasing concerns regarding the impact that a recent presidential executive order on immigration matters and corresponding implementation memos from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security will have on the operations of local law enforcement and school districts. They are sending recommendations to every school superintendent and police chief in the state outlining suggested protocols to help these jurisdictions inform local decision-making communication efforts with their families and their respective communities. The recommendations include, but are not limited to, the following. Local law enforcement should not take action that solely enforce federal immigration law. The federal government cannot mandate states to investigate and enforce actions that have no nexus to the enforcement of Connecticut law or local ordinance. ICE detainer requests are requests. They are not warrants or orders, and this should only be honored as set forth in Connecticut law unless accompanied by judicial warrant. Law enforcement should not provide access to individuals who are in law enforcement custody for purposes of questioning by ICE. And such questions as noted should be referred up to the chain of command for evaluation. If an ICE agent approaches a school asking for student information or for access to a student, that agent should be referred to the superintendent's office or to the office of an appropriate administrator designated by superintendent. Governor explained that enforcement for these federal actions will likely result in a host of constitutional concerns and legal questions that are thrust upon local communities, and that in mind he is encouraging town and city officials to give due consideration into these matters so that a sound, comprehensive plan can be placed should these issues abruptly arise in their respective communities. Ultimately, local law enforcement agencies determine whether and not to what the extent within the perimeters of the Connecticut Trust Act they assist the Immigration and Custom Enforcement Federal Agency. Put all opinions about this presidential executive order aside, its enforcement is going to have a local impact, especially given the constrained resources and financial impact this will have on the state and municipal budgets, which we already know are stretched to their limits. In addition, giving rise to serious concerns that affect communities, Governor Malloy said. Above all, we are obligated to protect the rights afforded to all our residents, ensuring that students attend safe, welcoming schools. The best approach for local communities is to have a plan in place that everyone in our state, including young students, are supported respectfully and fairly under the laws of our state and our nation. Something to look at. Something to think about. Well. Like you see a little doublespeak there on this. Trying to make it to a sanctuary state based on what I read. So, and remember, Governor Malloy has an oath, too, to protect and defend both U.S. and Florida constitutions. Article 4, Section 4. Defend the nation, a republican form of government to repel against invasion. Invasion is trespassing. So, you have to look at that, too. I always call him Chump Malloy. He'll do it for so-called illegals, immigrants, or criminals, but he don't want to see his people in Connecticut defend themselves, use certain farms to defend themselves and their families. Guy's a pathetic hypocrite. That's why I call him Chump Malloy, because he's just another unbearable stooge. Too bad. The unconstitutional state of Connecticut. Well, folks, in that state, you got the power to prepare yourselves against this. And you can make a difference. You can tell Governor Malloy to stick it. Because he needs you more than you need them. All right? Plain and simple. And it's not condemning anyone in general. It just doesn't matter where you're from. You have the same surname. If you're in here illegally. See if your name is mine, you look like me. If you're in here illegally, you consider trespassing. I always tell folks, there's attorneys out there, immigration attorneys will give you a hand. Organize. Okay, instead of wandering around, organize. Get yourself represented. Cover your tracks. That's all I have to say. All right, my friends, I'd like to thank everyone for listening to the show. Plus, feel free to download and share this throughout your social media networks. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to send me something that's interesting I may want to check out, whatever you do, please address your correspondences with decorum. You can hit me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Spreaker, iHeartRadio, Tumblr, YouTube, Freedom's Network, Scene.life, and Minds.com. I always get that dead air there. I apologize for that, my friends. In addition, you can email me at LokiLuck3, which is LokiLuck, the number 3 altogether, at gmail.com. Ooh, it's going to be March in a couple of days. Wow, time is flying by. All right, my friends. Thank you for your time. Plus, always remember that demoniac resistance is healthy for the soul and can liberate humanity. Until next time, take care of yourselves, keep on spreading the love, and may your guardian spirits be with you.